day in, day out from our clients around the world is the exponential rate of change. And how do we prepare our leaders to deal with so much change coming at us so quickly, so constantly? So future-ready leadership. Today, we're joined by two experts, and we're very pleased to have with us Stefan Breben, coming from the south of Germany, an executive in several different organizations, and a very good friend of the Center for Great Leadership. Stefan has gone through several different programs over the course of his career, so he'll be speaking, kind of bringing his wisdom and words of experience. And Dr. Gina Eckert. Gina is a strategic business partner here in Europe, also based in Germany. And in addition to the work she does with clients, Gina is an expert in research and publishing, and she's done quite a bit of research in this area of future-ready leadership as well. So it's a pleasure to have everybody here with us. And I'm just going to let them introduce themselves. And as they're doing that, participants here, why don't you put into chat, where are you dialing in from? We're coming in from Europe, but I think we have people from around the world. So just pop in chat where you're dialing in from today. It'll be interesting for us to see that. Stefan, who are you and what brought you to the Center for Creative Leadership?
Thank you, David. Thank you. Hello to everyone, and great to be here. Yeah, long-term friend of CCL. I was doing the first course, actually 2011. So the last 15 years of my executive education and leadership education was with the Center of Creative Leadership. I've been, my professional career was mostly in American FMCG companies, 24 years, 4 different continents, various different functions, heading functions, organizations, and divisions, and then changed to B2B to see the other side of the coin within a German DAX company, and then later on running a mid-sized company here in Germany on the all in the food sector, by the way. Food is the passion. Yeah, what brought me here to participate in this very exciting topic. I think I want to tell you a little story. It's a real-time story from my times at a mid-sized German company, about 5 billion global company, and it happens that the board is asking the divisional leadership teams. There were 3 divisions, and I was part of the one division leadership team, to have regular business reviews with the board. And within these business reviews, you would tend to focus and zoom in on one topic. It may be supply chain or operations or leadership and succession planning and recruitment. And so in this particular instance, it was actually succession planning, talent pipeline, robustness of the talent pipeline, and the rest of it. So we did that. We prepared for it. Our HR department did all the expert interviews, and we had a preview before going to the board, as you usually do in executive functions. And it was fantastic, lots of PowerPoints. And then the question came up: so how do we actually attract young talent to our organization and keep them there and develop them and make them future ready, as we said even at that time? And HR said, hey, we've got the answer. Here is a career plan, and it goes from several different stages, and they get all the expertise they need to become presidents and vice presidents, and divided by technical and commercial functions, people leaders or specialists, you name it, you got it. Until somebody noticed on that chart, there is about a 19-year difference between went from when they join to when they actually have a chance to become vice president, if everything goes okay. So we sat there, picture this, and we sat there and we looked at each other and we said, it was quite an embarrassing moment, to be honest. It's like, it's not going to cut it. We're not going to get this. It was 2019, guys, when Amazon, were testing same-day deliveries, and on your mobile phone, you have everything at a fingertip. And we're telling people coming from university, in 18 years from now, you may have an opportunity to become vice president. So this revelation, obviously it was very embarrassing, because as in the leadership team, nobody admitted that he doesn't have a clue what to do now. So we were debating back and forth, and two things from that before I take too much time and let Gina introduce herself. One is, it was embarrassing for me personally, because we really missed the mark. We missed the mark of answering to the board and to future generations on how attractive we can be. And me myself, we haven't actually indulged in that topic too much, so we didn't have an answer, and we didn't even know how to approach it at that time. And the second revelation is organizationally. I mean, if you are not able to attract young talent for the future, you're going to die at some point in time. So two aspects of the same point, but you know, showing a little bit of vulnerability. Not everything in the executive leadership teams always finds an answer, and that's why I'm here, because ever since it was one of the topics I was working on.
Well, thank you so much for that vulnerability, Stefan. I think modeling that for people is important, and realizing that sometimes as we're building organizational capacities, we learn about what we missed the mark on, and in addition to what we've done extremely well. So thank you for that. And we're going to explore that a little bit. This vulnerability, we're going to open up that topic up a little bit in this conversation. Great. So Gina, who are you? And what can you tell us a little bit about your client journeys and the importance of investing in leadership development in these times of such radical change?
Yeah, and when have they not been, right? I mean, that's sometimes when I'm looking back and I'm thinking, when have we ever actually felt like this is an easy time? And every time we are proven that in retrospect, it was probably easier, and it's not just the power of hindsight. So my name is Gina Eckert, and I'm a strategic business director at the Center for Creative Leadership in Europe. I've officially reached organizational maturity, at least when you apply European measures, and had varying roles in CCL, everything connected with leadership development. And many people who know me and who know that I'm not necessarily a steady soul, they ask me, why on earth are you doing this? And why have you been at that organization for so long? And it comes basically down to the impact that I see that we achieve in developing leaders for the benefit of society worldwide. And I think that is more relevant now than ever. The less we know about the future, and I think we are becoming increasingly aware that we really don't know about the future, the more we become aware of all of the different levers and little screws that might determine what might happen next, and the interconnectedness that we see on a global scale, the more important it is to have leadership that helps us interpret these signals, that helps us create, recreate, reevaluate, and sometimes totally redraw our plans and our collective actions so we can use the opportunities that are emerging. And that requires leaders that, as you just modeled, Stefan, also learn from, well, what hasn't worked so well, that aren't necessarily steeped in, oh, it's always worked this way, so it will work in the future as well. And leaders who are really passionate about learning from each other and talking with one another. So I'm super happy to see that so many people have already joined us on the chat, and I'm looking forward to having a bit of a conversation with you as well.
Great. Yeah, so thank you, Gina, for that. Let's open up the conversation. And I'm interested, Stefan, you've done different leadership development experiences over the course of your career, and typically there's some transformational moments. I know that you were involved in a Leadership at the Peak program. Can you think of anything that was particularly transformational that impacted the way you lead others?
Well, so yes, of course. I mean, the first transformational experience throughout the entire journey was actually having a leadership development plan, which is not common. When I you know, back in the 90s, I joined commercial, and you grow up in large organization. You sort of go from year to year, and you do this course and you do that course, and then depending on your needs, obviously you adapt. But having a long-term plan ahead of you that gives you the confidence that you actually have a structure, and that in itself gives you robustness, it gives you perspective, and it gives you a goal to go for. Also makes you self-assured that you're developing into leadership, which nobody of us has been taught in university to the extent that we actually need it in real life. And you're developing that skill as you climb up the corporate career ladder. So that's one. The second one was actually LAP, like you mentioned. I introduced that little story before, which was, I call it the expulsion from paradise, when it comes to our ability to solve future problems with talent recruitment. And as it so happens that wasn't planned, later in the year, I actually attended LAP. Leadership at the Peak in the end of 2019. And that was just in time, because it makes me step back and take a deep look at me and what I want, and why am I not prepared for what was supposedly be my job, leading, securing the organization of the future and building talent. And we weren't prepared for it. And so that was a great break, a lot of reflection there with all the tools and the tests, the feedbacks, the 360s, but also the career journey with a coach at that time was extremely helpful. Helpful to the extent that, and I think every leader at a certain point in time in his career, when he decides to become a people leader, needs to make a decision. And the decision is, do you want to lead people and really lead people, develop them, grow them, and put all your efforts into that? Or are you in there for the business? Which is not bad or good, black and white. It's just a choice you make. And when you make that choice for people, you better make sure you equip yourself to do that, because it's not just coming naturally.
Right. Yeah, we see that in our courses. We're learning new capabilities every time we're going through leadership development, and that's new. And implementing new things can take a little bit of time. Sometimes it's not the most natural thing in the world. And what we find is, as you were saying, people that are there for the business, in the business, at the same time for the people in the business. And we're finding this polarity be more and more important, to manage both and do them both well at the same time. Thank you for that. Yeah. So what are some of those capabilities, Gene? I think you've got some specific capabilities perhaps that we should be focusing on for the future of leadership.
Well, yeah, I was smiling when Stefan, you shared you felt you weren't prepared to lead for the future. And I guess that is almost a Socratic moment that leaders have to go through, because we cannot possibly feel prepared for something we don't know what it's going to be like. Yeah. What could that being prepared possibly feel, right? So we can only do our best to anticipate as much as possible and engage in those skills that will help us be prepared at the moment when we have to do what we have to do. And we see that with so many societies that at this time feel that there is very little continuity, not only from a business world, but also from a societal standpoint. I'm looking at everyone who's joining from so many places in the world, and I'd love to hear, what are the things that you're battling with at the moment? What are those uncertain futures that you need to lead through? And that is also one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated by leadership. So when I'm not working at the Center for Creative Leadership, I'm actually an emergency medical technician. I'm driving ambulances for the Red Cross, which is my continuous practice for leading into the unknown, because you don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes. And the only thing that you can be sure of is that what you think is going to happen is exactly not what's going to happen. And what I've learned from that is that you need to have a really good team. You need to be aligned in the team of how you're going to regroup, of how you're going to reorganize and replan. You need to have a really good set of communication structures and conversation principles, and you need to have a certain equitability. Sorry, I'm not a native speaker. I hope it's not detrimental for everybody who is, but you need to have that equitability of people, and everybody feels like, hey, yeah, I can speak up. And if I see something that you don't see, and that's the same in business, I feel like I need to say something, and that is appreciated because it moves all of us forward. It creates clarity. And those are practices and skills that we've also just recently written about at CCL at the research about leading in polycrisis, because that is the kind of environment that we have now. I've been asking people, okay, so you're telling me that you're leading in a crisis, but which crisis are you referring to? We have a health crisis. We have a crisis in terms of rising inequality in society. We have a crisis in terms of wars at different places. Which crisis is it that you're leading in? And it's not just one, it's multiple ones. It's a polycrisis. And overall, it's becoming very brittle as an environment to lead into. And that is what my colleague Jean Leslie, and I think we're going to be able to put that link in the chat for everybody, has written beautifully and really detailed out the 6 key capabilities that are about leading in this polycrisis environment. And those have to do with becoming resilient, finding ways to make sense of what's happening, to find a way forward, but then also be ready to throw everything overboard that you thought so far because your assumptions are being proven wrong, and you start again. But you're not starting out again as a loner. You know, as you said, Stefan, if you decide you really want to lead people, you need to lead people. You need to bring them with you, else the organization is going to be an N of 1. That's not sustainable either. And so those are the capabilities that I find so incredibly fascinating to develop. And I also find when we are working with organizations and they are developing them for every leader individually, but we're also working with leaders together as an intact team, that's what makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I think what you just mentioned on working with a team, that really will become or is becoming in the last years in a polycrisis, that's a key element. You can't emphasize enough. I think when you put in a leadership position in typical organizations, whether you're a technical leader or a commercial leader, people look to you to make decisions, typically. Now, if you rely on, like 20 years back, the world was a little simpler, it was a little more structured. You could actually claim, yeah, I have 80% oversight of the issues and the dimensions of the decision I'm going to make. Now, in polycrisis situations, I don't know if anyone in the world has at any point in time the whole visibility on what he decides and what impact it will have, whether it will be a new factory in a given country, a new line in an existing factory, or just simple things like which car to buy for your sales force. At the end of the day, the term BANI was phrased, and brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. And I think as a leader, coming from LAPD, continuing on the time frame here, one of the things I worked very well in our case was literally taking a step back with the team and just taking a moment in every meeting when a decision was about to be made to make sure that maybe we're not aiming with that decision for that one solution that was required in the past, but we're managing polarities here because there's so many elements at place at every decision that at any point in time, you need to make a decision. That's your job. That's what we're hired for, and that's what the organization needs. But you will not find that one solution that satisfies everything. If you put yourself in the mental corner on the outset of the decision-making process, that may become a limitation. And in some cases, being German, we always look for the perfect solution. Anyway, managing polarities just opened up opportunities to make decisions faster, make them with the team, taking the stakeholders' views in, and accepting the fact that it might be imperfect, but it is the right thing to do right now. And I think CCL made a piece on managing polarities a couple of years back, which was of great help. And bringing the team together and bringing them in the right mind frame, that worked very well for me in crisis situation. As said, there was in 2022 there was the Ukraine war, then there was the price hike in raw materials, the hyperinflation in some areas, and we were so busy. That's the polycrisis, under pressure to make these decisions. So decision making is absolutely key, coming from that elevated position of we can't get it 100% right, but 90%, will do. And it's progress that counts, not perfection most of the time.
It sounds to me like we're kind of building on the concept of decision making and expanding the concept a little bit. It's not quite as straightforward as many of us experience early in our careers.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this concept of polarities, and this is something we speak about quite a bit at the Center for Creative Leadership. Gina, what are some of those polarities, perhaps, that you see leaders really struggling with these days that they should be focusing on?
Oh, there are many. Thank you for asking, David. And I already see also some in chat that our audience is bringing up. So one of the polarities is about the business success in terms of the commercial, and focusing on the human aspect. And of course, I mean, being the Center for Creative Leadership, we're focusing mainly on the human aspect because we know that we're not going to have commercial success without the human aspect. They're not an either or. They're actually, the one is the means towards the other. And that is one of those polarities that I think many leaders are struggling with, to say, well, do I get the headspace? Do I get the license? How can I create my own mindset as well, that I really focus on the people aspects, which I know are important, but then I'm so driven by systems and structures and reporting requirements that I'm really focusing on everything but the people aspect. And then the best resources we have, humans, are walking away because they don't necessarily feel valued, right? Your money isn't walking away if you're not investing it. It just gets less and less in terms of value, but your people just walk. And I think that is one of the elements that I see many organizations struggle with and not navigate all that well. We also see many times the struggle between, well, focusing on novelty and technological innovation, focusing on AI, running after the latest hype. And in our work, and I think some of who's listening, who are leadership practitioners, you will know that as well. There's a lot of, oh my God, what's the latest fad that people are chasing? What's the latest idea? And is there gold in it? Well, it's an idea, so the proof is going to be in the pudding. We have to see how it's implemented. But really chasing after the innovation and knowing what has given us sustained success in the past. And I have some clients where I'm realizing that polarity is managed with a lot of reflection and in a very delicate way, partly out of respect and understanding that what has brought them to where they are now has actually been thought through over decades with as much investment in mind and emotions as they are investing as well. And there is a certain mandate that we have as leaders to bring that forward, to keep that level of excellence in what we're doing. But it is not easy. It is not easy. And I see there is a lot of distractions that we are exposed to, and arguably more than ever before. So we have to get through that fog to actually develop that clarity for ourselves, so we can make a decision that reflects the polarities that we see, but also is mindful of all of the different little influences that are on the perimeters of our priorities in organizations.
Here's a polarity. I love that, Gina. And here's a polarity for you in leading diverse teams. I'm reading in the chat that if we can address the topic of soft skills and leading diverse teams, it's like chasing the latest fad, new technology, GPT, ChatGPT, et cetera, and what's the next big thing in innovation, versus some things that don't change. Because we always tend to forget, and we say, well, everything is changing. Really? Let's think if everything is changing. A simple one, we're still people. We yearn for recognition. We want to be heard. We want a career. We want a sense of belonging. That are the fundamentals of leadership and building a great team. And I'm not here talking about, you guys are the expert of building great teams, but those things I found over my 25 or 30-year career, that hasn't really changed much. It's become in different ways and it come in different shades. But the fundamentals of being a human at the end of the day is the same like 20 years ago. What has changed is the way we interact, yeah, and the way to talk to each other, and that needs to be mastered. But yeah, sometimes I feel we're getting confused in all the change about what really counts and what drives us forward.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there, Stefan. And I see that with so many leaders. We are still human, and we need to remind ourselves that that is the biggest lever that we have in organizations for being a leader, is working with that human side. And that requires us connecting with people on an emotional level, and really taking the time and taking the energy to have the right conversations, and not only blurb out information, not only use the by now infamous 160 signs, right, to convey our messages, but really entering into dialogue. And I see so many leaders who appreciate that at CCL we give them time to actually do that, to practice that. It requires a lot of effort. It requires a lot of concentration and focus to not go back into your own dialogue with your own self, or with your doubts, or with your alter ego, and really listen to the other person with fascination, and to understand them, where they're coming from, where their perspective is coming from, because that is then enriching us and enriching our own understanding of any situation we're in, so that any decision we're making is not only paying into the perspective that other people have, but arguably is becoming better as well for taking into account more context. One of the researchers that has influenced me greatly in my earlier academic career, before joining CCL and early on in CCL, but also now in my practice with leaders, is Sharon Nemeth, and her work on the importance of minority dissent. And I do think that that is a critical area for leadership, is to ensure that we have organizations that have a culture where that dissent from minorities, minority viewpoints, people who see things differently, people who have different information, people who might have creative sparks that others don't have, that is actually taken into account in the overall process of leadership and decision making, because it's not coming natural. And that's where leaders can really benefit so much, and where I see that sometimes we're not paying attention to at all when we are superficially communicating with one another, exchanging messages, but we're not talking, we're not having a conversation like we're here, right? We're having that conversation here right now.
Yeah, I think it's spot on. And the research that you mentioned, it's teasing out the diversity of thinking and the creative sparks of people. That's more important than ever, because everybody has a different viewpoint. I want to really, because David, you asked me on the forefront of this, so tell us about your experiences. And one of the experiences really, we're talking about decision making lightheartedly, and it's a big thing. I think in my experience, focusing as a leader on decision making within the team is so rich. You can lead through decision making and tease out the creative and the different aspects, versus all the other things you need to focus on leadership and managing people and the organization and the stakeholders, left, right, and center. And I think that helped me a great deal. If you have one thing that you really get passionate about, and in decision making, it goes beyond the critical thinking techniques that you have, situation analysis and problem solving and opportunity analysis and all the rest of it. But there's great research done on the Center of Creative Leadership, but also others, is how you step back and first of all assess whether you apply system 1 or system 2 thinking. Is there a time factor to it or not? And you clearly spell that out in a diverse team and make it very apparent, what are we doing here? And giving yourself room to reflect, to interact, to communicate, because that's what business is all about. Decision making at the end of the day, decision from leaders, also how to approach decisions. lonely decision or a decision in a team. So decision making is a bit of a hobby. Maybe you can notice, or the audience can notice, but it's so rich in interacting with people, with all the research behind it. If you focus on that, I think that's a good lever.
Yeah, Stefan, you've mentioned several times in that decision-making process, stepping back, taking some time, opening it up to the team. And Gina, you spoke about getting those dissenting sort of ideas and perspectives. So I'm curious, what creates the safety in a team that allows people to do that allows people to speak up, allows people to make mistakes, or say the crazy thing that's kind of at the top of their mind? How about the psychological safety in the teams?
Happy to. And first of all, kudos to Alan. Indeed, those of you who know the Quaker method, for having everybody participate equitably and speaking up as the spirit moves you is one way to establish a key element for people to speak up, which is that psychological safety. And that relies on the on the appreciation that humans in the room, virtual or physical, have for one another on a human being level. So it starts really with perceiving each other as the human that we are. And then, of course, also as a professional. But we're not ever seeing only the professional. We're not ever seeing only the work achievements, but we're seeing the soul as well. And that creates a spirit where we, on a very basic level, appreciate each other, and we appreciate each other's imperfections. We don't necessarily appreciate only the one single only truth. We appreciate where people are coming from, their diverse perspectives and their contributions, their concerns, and sometimes also their resistance, which is an important element. I've experienced the best decisions coming from very heated debates, and if we have Germans here, you know that we are the world masters in heated debates, right? We don't think a decision is a good one if it hasn't been debated at least 3 times over beforehand, but then implementation goes smoothly because you have created real buy-in from people from very different viewpoints. So what leaders can do is really to create that environment, that climate for psychological safety in their teams and in organizations. And I'm always the one who wants to drop links here. So we're also going to post a link for everyone who you already know, maybe Amy Edmondson, who's been a longtime board member of CCL. And she's just summarized a whole body of work on psychological safety beautifully in a TED Talk, including things you can do as a leader, but also how you can assess whether psychological safety is actually happening in your team. So I highly recommend you, if you like podcasts, if you like videos, you just listen to that. Maybe the first time, maybe the second time, maybe the 20th time, because you can still learn after the 20th time as well.
Yeah, brilliant. I haven't read that yet. One of the things, it's the probably most simple and pragmatic advice how to create psychological safety. Just be a human person and be vulnerable. You know, everyone makes mistakes. The leader makes mistakes. And depending on the level of hierarchy you're in the organization, your mistakes are bigger and smaller. Yeah, but that's what you're paid for. I mean, one of the things I did in my past, which worked fine, according to the feedback that I received, was very simply, again, depending on the hierarchy and the type of decision you are pursuing in that session, is to make everybody aware that if they make a decision and we follow that decision, would that actually ruin the company? Yeah, just ask the question, and everybody goes like, well, probably not. Then I say, what are we afraid of? If we think it's the right thing to do, then let's do it. Yeah, and if we sink the company, yeah, it's me sinking the company, not you. But in most of the cases, you know, we treat decisions as life and death decisions all the time, and it's not true. Yeah, it's in our heads. We don't want to make mistakes, and take away the fear of making a mistake and the fear from the consequence of making that decision. Then I think you tease out a lightheartedness. That doesn't mean you should become less thorough in decision making and taking the decision serious. You just become lighthearted, yeah, and open up to a field of new ideas. So that worked well in the past. in a German environment, but also in an American environment.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic lead, Stefan. And I want to appreciate, just shout out to all of the wisdom that's dropping in chat as well, around psychological safety and around that inner resignation that people might feel if they're not given that perception that they matter as a human being, that they matter and their needs matter. And that, of course, includes the development of them as leaders of the future. And I wanted to just answer one question particularly about, well, are there any data that show that leadership development, HR practices actually matter? A lot of my work over the last 15 years has been in the health sector. And among that was working with the British NHS, so the National Health System there, to implement guidelines across the whole system for what good leadership looks like and how it can be measured. And in the NHS, because it is such a comprehensive system, we actually have a really good data basis to argue that good leadership practices do not only make a difference on staff satisfaction, on staff motivation and staff engagement, but they make a direct impact on patient outcomes, on how long patients need to stay in the hospital, how well they heal, and how many of them die. And there are various academic references that we can drop you. I'm going to pull some of those up afterwards as well to show you the relationship between HR and practices and patient deaths. And not all businesses have as striking indicators of performance as healthcare does. But I think if it works in healthcare, then you could probably argue that it works in most other industries as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tina, for that. I'm seeing some interesting questions around culture and how to build a culture where people feel like their voice actually is heard when they do sort of step up and speak up. Anything you can say about generating conversations that allow people to actually feel like they're being truly heard?
I think if I may start, it's a very pragmatic one, from straight from the field. In any organization, you will have people that are willing to go with a change in culture, and that's what we're talking about: changing culture, change in leadership, future-ready leadership, because you need to change. And there will be people who are less open to it. So before we even go to the point of how to change your culture, you as a leader, make sure you get the right ones on the team. Yeah, it's the bell curve. You got the early adopters, you got the innovators, and then you got all the laggards. But if you get enough people with you who are open as a human being, who have a connection, then you actually stand a chance to change a culture. If you're starting just by yourself, straight to the question of how to create a new culture, and you do it yourself, and you have a multiple of one-on-ones, and you spend your evenings with business dinners, you run a high risk of burning out really quickly, because you're fighting against a monster, depending how big your organization is. So make sure you're being very conscious about the team you're engaging, the organization you want to impact, and the scale you need in order to impact it before you even get to how to actually do it. That would be my pragmatic advice.
Thanks, Stefan.
And I think that speaks to the observation I had as well, is if you want to make that change, the lonely fight for us, first of all, we should all ask ourselves, who am I to think that my idea is better? And not saying that it isn't, but we need to be a little humble and self-critical when we are making those suggestions. And why do you think it really is better? And maybe my idea becomes even better if it is shared by 10 others as well. So you don't have to go and do that on your own, but you want to gather people around you who also have that desire for organizational change. And together you have a much more powerful voice, and you're not going to be the lone wolf out there. I've seen that practice of organizational change take shape in so many ways. So some organizations have built in great mechanisms for doing change bottom up, where they are really espousing things like listening sessions, all staff gatherings, but also informal ones where just one day in front of the food courts, when you go down for lunch, you have pop-up pin boards, and you're just asked for your opinion. You're asked for your voice, for it to be heard, and there is a follow-up process, also showing people what's going to happen next and why it matters for you to actually speak up. There's a very easy effect. And then on a more senior level, various organizations sometimes go to the process of hiring what they call strategic misfits. And that is a very tricky situation to do right. I don't know, maybe some people in chat have also had that experience of being hired because you were a strategic misfit, because you're already bringing something to the organization that the organization knows it needs culturally, not just in terms of expertise, but culturally to move forward. And that's a very hard place to be. And those are the people who really know that they can't win if they stay lonely wolves. That's where you really have to work together very soon and create that nucleus, and maybe like a center of excellence informally, like the center of practitioners informally who are already living that way to help the rest of the organization move into it. But that's where I think we can really achieve the best impact and organizational movement if we're not focused too much on ourselves, but we are really focused on building a we. And we're really focused on listening what others want, on being respectful, in showing how current practices maybe create impact that is not appreciated, also maybe by people from different groups and different societies. And that's where those conversation skills that you mentioned, David, are really coming in. We have a great case study from a North Carolina organization, RPM, as well. We can drop that as a resource for everybody to look at how that little conversation training can actually change the whole organizational culture, which I think is a really nice story to read.
Yeah, thank you for that, Gina. We have something called Better Conversations Every Day, right? How did you get people interacting, conversing, dialoguing in deeper, more profound ways, and the importance of that in creating that culture that we're speaking about. So thanks for bringing that up. So we're coming to the end of this particular engagement. Stefan, any messages you'd like to pass on to some of those young leaders that are coming up and building their capacities, their capabilities for the future?
Oh, that's one of my passions. Yeah, I mean, the topic of the discussion is future-ready leadership. And like I said before, when you're an emerging leader and you're in a first role, or first line manager role, or you're a little bit more advanced, I'm not sure if you had the opportunity to look at it yourself and say, what is my development plan going forward, not only in the next 24 hours or 24 months or 12 months to the next seminar, but do I really want to develop into that leadership role and leading people, doing all the things that Gina spoke about, being open, being vulnerable, doing conversations training, because that's energy training. It's take a real energy, and the most engaging factor of engaging in anything of change or leading people is if you're convinced about it and this is your mission and your passion. So coming back to LAP, one of the things I came away with is the mantra of being the manager or the leader that people want to be remember or want to remember when they are advanced in their career. Not right now, but when they're advanced in their career. And if you're going down that path, I think taking that opportunity to stepping back and deciding, making a clear decision for yourself, that's worth a lot. And then make a plan of keeping that education up, even if you change employers. Yeah, the employers are ready to. Some of them are actually very happy if you tell them at the time of recruitment, look, I'm on that development journey and I want to continue that. Will you facilitate that? And there's quite a number of employers that will say, yeah, happy to do so, because we don't have to think about it then.
Thank you so much for being one of those leaders and being an example, a role model for other people, and for staying close to the Center for Creative Leadership. We certainly appreciate your interactions with us. And Gina, thank you so much for sharing your words of wisdom. You've done such wonderful research and publishing over the years and great client work. So thank you very much for sharing that. And we'd like to thank everybody that's here. Please continue to join these LinkedIn Live events. We enjoy spending time with you and having your input and your observations as well. And so please continue to join. And we're here to make available our programs, our coaching, our research, all the work we do with clients. It's all at your fingertips. So we appreciate you being with us and continue to have this relationship going forward in the future. Thanks, everybody.